Greg, I cannot wait to dig into this topic. Well, I'm excited to dig into any topic we cover on the UPSTACK podcast, but this one is near and dear to, maybe the most near and dear to our heart to date, given what's guiding this conversation is something that we worked with our colleagues to create and frankly share with the world. It's the 2024 UPSTACK Technology Trends Report. I know you've read it cover to cover, and you also contributed to it. Let's dig into, why not start with the top trend, which is in the news seemingly every day, not only within our industry, but the world at large, and that's cybersecurity, or security as identified in the Tech Trends Report. And joining us today, it's a very hot topic, highly relevant if you're not thinking of, focused on, and certainly worrying about, but we don't want to instill worry on the podcast, your security posture, and if it's defensive or maybe open to threats. You certainly should be, but thankfully there's people who can help provide deeper understanding and also help you change that posture if it needs changing, and it very well might. So without further ado, let's welcome in a good friend and colleague of ours, the one, the only, Frank Ferdowsian. Frank, there he is. Frank, welcome to the UPSTACK podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're not going to drop your line. You're a dutiful listener of the podcast.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you. There it is.
Frank. We're honored, Frank. We're honored. We're actually more
Frank,
honored that security is the topic. We've talked about it previously on the show, and it's in a light capacity. So we're happy to really just dig in deeper with you today.
Yeah, there's some a great episode on cybersecurity, but there's certainly more to unpack. And we're going to get into some of those more detailed trends within cybersecurity more broadly. But Frank, you're one of our partner and managing directors at UPSTACK, an industry veteran, over 20 years of experience. I don't want to date our guests, with a range of expertise. And one of your greatest areas of expertise, of course, is security. So when we were looking for fresh perspective on this very hot topic, of course you came to mind, you graciously agreed, and here we are. Let's talk security, everybody. So tops on the list, if we're looking at the Tech Trends Report, the top trend identified by our leading technology experts, that's a group of over 40 industry veterans who are part of the UPSTACK team. And keep in mind that as part of the Tech Trends Report, this is based off of survey results. So we polled our team members and they provided the insights that guided the report that hopefully everyone's now enjoying today. The leading trend within cybersecurity is the idea of expanding edge is increasing surface area of attack. So I'm going to interpret this to mean, without reading the report verbatim, that additional vectors are being opened up. We're expanding the reach of our infrastructure. There's new endpoints that are providing great value to companies and helping companies deliver optimal experiences to customers and do their business more efficiently. But with that comes potential areas for threat. I liken it to every time I add a new smart home device to my network, which is a COVID holdover. It's my obsession. I need to make sure it's secure. But Frank, if we start there, this idea of the edge, also a very popular topic, and how it relates to cybersecurity. What are your thoughts on that as a new threat vector, one to be addressed through an improved security posture?
It's a very interesting area because we're all using a variety of outsourced or cloud-based solutions nowadays. And every one of those is, as you mentioned, a threat vector for us. And not only do we have to now protect our physical infrastructure, we also have to now protect our virtual infrastructure, which some folks make an assumption that the providers are going to protect us, but we really have to take that upon ourselves to make sure that those areas are well protected within our own scopes.
So that's actually a really good point. So it's the client should be putting in as much effort as the provider to really understand what this means to their organization. So with such a lack of what we call expertise, right, within the CISO community. I mean, it seems to me as though the larger organizations, Fortune 500 plus, are the ones that can afford and keep working a formal CISO, right? So if you lack the experience on your internal teams, how do you go about doing that?
It's a great question, Greg. And there are a number of great providers out there that we can get fractional, maybe a quarter of the time, half the time. So we don't have to make that heavy investment in those resources. We can essentially take a fraction of their time to make sure that our cybersecurity posture is to a point that we as an enterprise feel very comfortable with the direction that we're heading. So just because we can't afford one full time, we can certainly, there are a number of great options that we can get on a fractional or timeshare basis, right? Even our virtual chief information security officers are now can be leveraged as a timeshare type of product.
So the resources, no matter the size of your organization, this resource, this capability is available, which should offer some assurance to customers, no matter the size of your organization.
Do you feel that when you do look for a fractional person, that person should be relevant to your vertical? Like if you're a financial company, is it important to get somebody out of that community, or is anybody capable of kind of satisfying, or does it get really that specific within the security industry?
Great question, Greg. We want to take the time to understand our customers' vertical, what the requirements are. Applications are somewhat different. The threat vectors are somewhat different. So we always look for that virtual or partial CISOs that have that expertise in those verticals. I think it's important if you're a financial institution that the part-time resource that we're getting, or full-time, whatever, they have those expertise in understanding the uniqueness of the financial industry versus a group that is a software development. So there are some specific, although at a high level, the understandings are similar, but there's also some uniqueness in each vertical, right? So that we want to make sure that as we work with our customers, that we understand their vertical and provide the right solution, right? Provide the right fit to make sure that that they're fully protected.
You mentioned threat vectors, Frank. I think that's one of the common terms, or dare I say, buzzwords within security. Posture is another. Maintain a defensive posture. Some companies prefer to maintain an offensive posture, being more proactive in making sure these threats are neutralized before they even reach their front gates. In our conversations leading up to today's episode, you talked about offense versus defense and how that might be changed in light of new technologies that have entered the market with force in the last 12 months. AI would be the one that comes to mind. And you had some really interesting thoughts on that.
It's the last 12 months in the cybersecurity space has been really interesting, where both the threat actors and our security postures are using a combination of AI and machine learning, not only for protection, but also for attacks. So it is it's become very interesting that both sides of the aisle, for lack of a better word, are leveraging those technologies not only to defend, but also to attack. So finding and being able for an AI on a defense to be able to outmaneuver an attack vector has become really an interesting challenge, and it's developed significantly especially in the last 12 months. It's intriguing that we're trying to be a couple of steps ahead of the attackers all the time. That's our goal, is be a couple of steps ahead of them. Because they're very creative. I mean, the creativity that we're seeing from various threat actors is extremely interesting.
And AI and certainly machine learning is able to analyze the behaviors, identify trends, and that's where it can be neutralized in advance. Are you seeing those cybersecurity providers on the supply side featuring AI more and more in their own technology stacks and what they're offering technology leaders?
Absolutely. I mean, this is even to a point that a number of providers, as we see various threats coming in, their AI engines can provide us guidance as to what needs to be done in order to isolate and eliminate those threats. While before, we had to somewhat rely on an individual guidance or somewhat of a little bit of a clunkier methodology as to what we need to do to isolate things. Here we can get to that attack significantly quicker, which in our space, in our industry, is really time is of the essence. If I can minimize that attack, if I can isolate that attack before it does more damage, the better it is. So that quickness of response has been one of the greatest attributes of machine learning and AI. We can quickly isolate things. We can quickly identify what we need to do to get on with it and get that threat neutralized.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit, if everyone's okay with it, to vendor management within this area, right? I think this is an important topic because it seems that most companies get overwhelmed when thinking about cybersecurity and what this means to their organizations. It's obviously an important one, probably the most important one. So if you think about it, a knee-jerk reaction for most organizations is to try to use a single vendor for everything. And most vendors won't turn down the revenue. They'll say they can do it, even if they have somebody on staff that's done it for 4 hours. And when it comes to cybersecurity, obviously the golden rule is to try to use a pure play based on each major segment, whether it's honeypot or network monitoring, et cetera. So what kind of advice could you give to some of the businesses out there when considering vendor selection? You don't want to go to your general practitioner for a cardiac issue. You want to go to a cardiologist. How do you advise your clients on this type of topic?
Our role, Greg, and this is we're peers in our industry. Our goal, our job is to essentially mute that noise for a few minutes, because there's a lot of noise coming from I'm the best, the other people are not, Our job is to essentially mute that noise for a few minutes. Let's get an understanding of what are we trying to accomplish together. And let's go find best of breed. And there's a lot of great organizations that we can leverage, organizations such as Cato, where we can start from the outside coming in and then from the inside coming out. So there's a lot of great ways for us to do that. But I think if we can just mute the noise for just a little bit of time so that we can just talk through the business challenges, talk through what our objectives are, independent of what all of these providers are trying to do, then we have accomplished our task, is making sure that we are, like you mentioned, Greg, if we're trying to do this, there are a number of best of breeds. Others may be good at it, but they're not best of breed. So let us put together a holistic, but again, we have to look at this as a holistic approach rather than just throwing tools at it, right? Look at it holistically, identify the gaps, and let's bring in best of breeds, because I think there's a lot of great organizations out there that can help us with that. But we got to mute the noise, because every time you turn around, somebody else is trying to say that they're the best thing since sliced bread.
I say that about myself from time to time, but
that's true.
You are, Alex.
Usually I get shouted down by pretty much everybody. So Frank, if we're thinking of the technology stack, you want to take a step back, survey your stack, and figure out what are the optimal solutions to provide to secure that stack. There may be overlays. There may be, Greg, kind of what you're touching on is offerings from the vendor or the provider that go alongside or are part of their technology, but just don't take it. You
Right.
just see the bigger picture and figure out, as we've learned in a previous episode, a lock is better than no lock. A good lock
Right.
is better than good locks everywhere, better than a great lock in a few places.
Right.
But it is about not hysteria, but take a deep breath.
Right.
Work with the trusted third party if you need to, and let's get a clear sense of what we're trying to accomplish. Frank, some will say it's not a matter of if you're breached, it's when. And that touches what you were just discussing. It's containing when there is a breach, when that threat makes it through the outer gates. How quickly can you contain it, neutralize it, and move on with your regular business? What can a technology leader do when that breach happens? Is it on you, the principal there, the holder of the P&L to manage that? Are there other resources they can call upon?
And you're spot on, Alex. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So there's a few things that we do throughout our process. And one of them is, let's gather all of the key stakeholders, from the legal department to marketing to the executive leadership to, all of these key stakeholders need to be what we call a tabletop exercise. Let's have a set of practice. Let's practice what will happen when we get breached. Just like any athlete goes through a rigorous, ongoing training before the game day, we do that ourselves. We need to do that ourselves as well. So in the event that this happens, what is the marketing message? What does legal need to do? What does IT need to do? Because again, our reputations are at risk. There's a significant, the posture that companies take needs to be prepared. Will we pay the ransom? Will we not pay the ransom? As we saw not too long ago, one of the great casinos decided not to pay the ransom, and it cost them over $100 million. Another casino decided to pay the ransom. It only cost them $15 million. So we need to be prepared. We need to have those run books. We need to do those tabletop exercises. So when that happens, everybody knows what to do. And to add to that, we need to make sure we got a great hostage negotiating team on hand to be able to help us navigate getting our data back.
Hostage negotiator. So bringing in, I don't know if
Morgan
people
Freeman?
have, Morgan Freeman, Samuel, bringing someone in to actually engage with the threat, with the other party who's breached your systems or has control of your proprietary data, whatever it may be. You mentioned the recent cyber attacks in Vegas, those
Right.
two major casinos. Shameless plug. You actually have a blog on UPSTACK.com just about this topic. What was really interesting about that, it certainly gives you pause. It's a great example of cybersecurity certainly entering the mainstream. It may, most surprising, may not have been the losses those casinos incurred based on that breach. It may not have been how each of the casinos, the different approaches they took to neutralizing the threat, one engaging, one choosing to go analog even. The most surprising piece of this story is what those bad actors used to gain access to the systems. Some would call it smishing. I think phishing was involved. So SMS texting, emailing employees, people with access to these systems, requesting password resets to get credentials. Talk about threat vectors. We value our colleagues, our employees. They're critical to running businesses, but we are all a vector. We need to make sure we stay buttoned up. And this actually is right in line with what we saw in the trends report in terms of social and or behavioral engineering. It's leveraging people to gain access when systems put up pretty strong defenses for the reasons we just talked about. Frank, thoughts on the evolution of social or behavioral engineering?
people in general are very trusting. We have a very trusting nature, which I think is great. This is one of the great human attributes is that we trust. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we really can't afford to be that trusting anymore. We may get an email from our CEO saying, hey, I need you to do this. Those threat actors have become very creative, and they have done their homework. They know the organization. Because they've been in, they do their research, unlike in the past where they would just send some kind of a email with lots of typos and you could easily identify. They've gotten very creative. So they may send you an email from the CEO, hey, I need you to do this. My password is broken, can you reset that? Just a general awareness that we no longer have that luxury to be so trusting. And that is also a change in our behavior, right? It is a change that we need to accommodate for to make sure that we no longer have, somewhat we've lost our innocence, but at the same time, unfortunately, that is the nature of cyber threats these days, that it takes a village. We all have to do our part in order to make sure that we have a good cyber hygiene and not be so trustworthy that, hey, just because the email comes from IT or Frank calls from IT, wants to reset your password or get access to your computer, let's slow down. Let's make sure Frank actually is who Frank says it is and verify things. Because Frank is a shady person.
That was a gem of a comment. We'll dial it back. You don't have to assume ill intent when it comes to every aspect of your life, but you would be wise to pause, trust, but verify. And we talked about AI and ML, machine learning, being applied in the space of bad actors as relates to cybersecurity, and that's being leveraged to draft very compelling emails from CEOs that have a lot of urgency in terms of tone and make people take action. So education is probably the best step an organization can take. Make them aware of these types of threats, understand that we all have a duty to each other, our company, and others related to the business to be on guard, not scared, be on guard. That goes back to this idea of posture. Optimistic. I like cautiously. That's the vibe of the UPSTACK podcast. And it's only fitting. But also creating systems and an approach. You mentioned tabletop exercises, Frank, penetration testing, regular password changes, training for the wider organization, vulnerability assessments, all things rapidly maturing and mature organizations do to make sure their defenses remain stout. So certainly words to live by. Frank, any parting thoughts when it comes to cybersecurity, its top ranking in the UPSTACK Tech Trends report or otherwise?
I am going to do a shameless plug. We here at UPSTACK are here to help. We deal with this day in and day out. My esteemed peer, Greg Moss, and I, and a number of our others, we're here to help. You don't have to do this alone. We're here to help you.
Yes, we are. This is something in terms of finger on the pulse, which is expressed that's one of the purposes behind the Tech Trends report, is democratizing this knowledge and helping make people aware. But there's also trusted partners you can work with to talk through these scenarios and figure out where your vulnerabilities may lie or how you might be able to change your stance or your greater security posture. Frank, I think we're going to have you back. Much more to cover here.
Bring them back. Bring him
back.
We're at your disposal, gentlemen. More than happy. I won't be able to use my opening line of long-time listener, first-time caller, so I should just say, I'll come up with a new line then.
You're a superhero. Security is an important sector, man. We should have you in a cape next time. Bring a cape.
Truly, all kidding aside, as we've established, cybersecurity has a role in every single aspect of the technology stack. We know our advisory partners, our technology experts, it's part of the conversation. If it isn't, it should be. Frank, you're a gem. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen.